it clicked that if I were to die today, I knew where I was going, and it wasn't going to be with Christ. But because of the independent Baptist mentality that I grew up with, the only way to become a Christian is you have to walk the aisle and talk to someone and then pray with them.
Right.
And so I'm panicked, on a state of anxiety all week. Lord, don't let me die this week. Hey everyone, today we're talking about making disciples, and the reason we're going to be talking about this specifically as a subject rather than interviewing someone about their vocation or something is because making disciples is a critical part of living an Enviado life, living sent. And so, but before we get to that, I just want to encourage you to do one simple act of kindness, and that is to subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you're listening or watching on. This little act of kindness will be a tremendous help to us. And so now that I've said that, let's get back to the podcast. Let's talk about making disciples. So without further ado, let's welcome my guest today, Mike Falkenstein. Mike, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, last time you were on my show, I actually said welcome back, but it was actually your first episode with us.
That's fine. No, I'm glad to be here.
So yeah, this time you're in person because last time you were virtual.
That's right.
So what do you think? I know you're from Denver.
That's right.
And you probably got smacked with some humidity last night when you flew in.
Definitely. I mean, that is really, especially in the summer, the difference between the two places is, these last couple of days as I'm driving around my area in South Denver, that air is so dry and so nice. And so, yeah, it's definitely a change for sure coming here. But I'm always glad to be here.
You have a ministry called 1-8 Catalyst.
That's right.
So why don't you just give like a 36,000 foot view of what that what's the purpose of that?
Yeah. So 1-8 Catalyst exists to create resources and training. So really a resource and training organization that kind of lives in this space, after someone's come to know Christ, then that's when we really want to help them grow spiritually, kind of leading them all the way towards them finding their, kingdom calling. So the way we put that in our mission statement is we exist to create resources and training that is a catalyst enabling every Christian to reach their world for Christ. And so our training and resources kind of run in 4 categories. Just quickly, we have a number of books that I've written, and those books generally are on either being a disciple of Jesus or making disciples, because we really feel like, if every good tree bears good fruit, we want to create a lot of good trees, right? The people that are on fire for Jesus, they love the Lord, they understand what it means to do, participate in the spiritual disciplines of being a believer, because we really believe then that people who are disciples of Jesus will want to reach others for Christ and make disciples. So we've got our book resources. We also have a podcast and other YouTube stuff that we do. One of the big areas now that's really growing for us is kind of what we call our online training portal. So if you go to equippingdepot.org, we have not only the listing of the books, but we've got a lot of articles we've written. There's all kinds of printed resources. If you don't know how to share the gospel, there's a video training course on how you can do that. And so again, just kind of in every step, we want to just make sure that people have kind of what they need. And then in a growing way, we have communities internationally that have said, could we get permission to translate one of your books to use for our own ministry? And so kind of our international ministry is another area that's growing. So my book, for example, on the 6 marks of a disciple has been translated into Portuguese and Indonesian, believe it or not. Next week I leave for Kenya. They're just finishing the Swahili translation of that book. The Chinese translation is probably 80, kind of stalled at this point, but it's kind of 80% done. And so in October, I'll go back to Turkey just to begin to look at some opportunities there. So what's fun about that, of course, is once you have a book translated into a language, that gives you kind of a whole additional platform. So like Kenya, for example, I've learned that Kenyan Christians love YouTube. And so they're always watching YouTube. So we think, well, could we just recruit a couple of Swahili-speaking Christians to create a little, 1-8 Catalyst YouTube channel in Kenya So we're going to be looking at that when I go next week. And so, but you don't get to some of those points unless you initially have that, that book. So, so that's fun. Just thinking about we're also training Christians internationally to reach their own country for Christ. It's kind of exciting.
So I'm curious, you're writing the books. You're an American.
That's
so
right.
Is it other Americans translating the book, or who's actually translating them?
Yeah, so it's generally, it kind of depends. So in the case of the Portuguese translation, there was a American missionary living in Brazil, but he had been there, whatever it was.
Well, he was there a long time.
Yeah, 30 years. So his Portuguese was excellent.
Yeah.
So he led a team of Portuguese-speaking Christians to translate the book. But like the Indonesian translation, for example, these were Indonesians who just happened to also know. So you do need people that know English and know the other language, right? So generally then what I do is as they get close to finishing the translation, I'll sit down with them for a few days and just help them finish. And my part in that really is just, they'll say, you use this, American or English terminology. What does that actually mean? And so I'll help them kind of so that they can accurately translate that. So we've had some of that. The other interesting thing is, like in this book on the 6 marks of a disciple, I mention the book was initially meant for just really American Christians. So all this international stuff just kind of was something that God has done. But in the book, I mentioned something about a baseball game that I was at. Well, in Indonesia, they don't have baseball. So they had to sort of add some additional kind of explanatory notes about why this,
Maybe
baseball
they need
game
a cricket explanation or something.
That's right. Yeah, we should probably do that. So that's kind of fun. So it kind of depends on each context. So the one nice thing about Kenya is that it was an English colony. So they are very proficient in English and in Swahili. And so these guys know both really pretty well. So even with that, when I go next week, we'll do that same thing where we'll kind of talk through, some of these finer details.
So the name 1-8 Catalyst, where did that come from?
Well, so, I've always been a big, Acts 1:8 fan, right? This very last thing that Jesus says to his followers as before he ascends, that, we're called to be his witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. And so this idea that, we're equipping people to be faithful witnesses to then take the gospel to our local area, our state, our country, and around the world really resonated. And then, this word catalyst initially comes from chemistry. And so, if something's a catalyst, it's really kind of a change agent. So because there are just so many Christians domestically and around the world that are, just kind of coasting in their walk with the Lord, we really do want to, call them to something more, not only towards being a faithful disciple of Jesus, but that, Steve, as you and I have already talked about a lot, we're each called to find out how God has, what kind of kingdom calling he's given us. And so, and we really believe that God's got something for all of us. And so not all of us are called to go overseas, but it might be, like I know you have some friends here in Spartanburg that do a prison ministry and are really faithful, so that's how God has called them, and you see how God's used it. And so it could just be something really local too. So that's kind of the genesis of the name of our ministry.
So as believers, is simply just praying the sinner's prayer not sufficient?
Well, I think we would say, obviously, that might be sufficient, depending on what happens there for salvation. But then, of course, God just calls us all to so much more. In Mark 16:15, one of our key passages, one of these 50 commands of Jesus that we always talk about, Jesus calls us to to proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. And that's, again, a command for us all. And then, of course, the passage in Matthew 28:19, where Jesus says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them and teaching them everything that I've commanded you to do." And again, we would say that that's a command for all of us. So I mean, obviously, that initial salvation event is good, but then, man, we are God's plan A for reaching the world, and there is no plan B. So I do think God calls us to a lot more than just receiving Him. We're also called to proclaim and make disciples as well.
So we were looking together, we were going back and forth the last couple of days talking about some statistics.
Right.
And I wrote quite a bit of them down, and I just want to give a disclaimer.
Okay.
Depending on who you talk to, the statistics change. They seem to a little bit conflict. I want to be honest about that, because we were talking about that earlier, that, okay, we're reading this over here, but this research over here is saying this. Maybe there's some nuance in there we're not aware of.
Well, and how the research is done.
Yeah, because, when we talk about...
who you're talking to.
Yeah.
What communities you're talking to, that there should be some change.
Because when there's research done with, say, for example, unreached people groups.
Right.
And you've got Joshua Project, you've got peoplegroups.org, which is Southern Baptist based. You have, I think there's another one out there, a third one. I can't remember off the top of my head who that is. But when you look at their numbers, there are some, I don't want to say discrepancies, but there's some differences.
Right. I would call it that too. Some
significant differences, but then you have to go into the nuances of what they are. So I just want to give a disclaimer. There's going to be nuances we don't understand in some of this. And just like with the unreached people groups, we're not, generally speaking, we would say it's all accurate. It's just how are they viewing it in how they're researching the actual, like how they came up with the figures. They're just not making it up. So there's going to be some similarities with this.
Right.
Since we've got a lot of Barna stuff.
That's right. They're one of the top folks.
They are generally very respected by most Christians.
That's right.
We've also got Lifeway, which, depending on who you are, you either like them or don't like them. And, and there's some people who kind of lean on the don't like in the Baptist world that I've come across. But either way, it's research, and I think generally they do a pretty good job. And so we'll just start with this one, because comparing it to some of the other stats we have, it's interesting to me. And I believe this one came from Barna. I did not write it down, but I think this one came from Barna. It says 69% of every believer believes that they have a responsibility to encourage non-believers to accept Christ. I believe probably from the same research, 68%. So in addition to that, 68% believe it's the pastor's job to equip as I call them, people in the pews, because I argue that, I agree with that. I mean, I'm surprised it's not higher. Why in the world does 32% not believe that?
Right.
Which makes me wonder, what do they actually believe a pastor's job is for?
Oh, right.
Their job is to train everyone else for the work of ministry, which is actually in Scripture. I'm just saying. So in some ways, even though I'm surprised it's not a little higher, well, surprised and not surprised.
Right.
It's actually a good starting point.
Yeah.
I mean, that's somewhat encouraging.
Right.
That people, so many believe that it's our job to encourage non-believers to, believe the gospel. I know there's people who don't think that, and we're going to get into that. But, I mean, what would you say in terms of those numbers right there?
In terms of, we could get into, what are the pastor's responsibility? What is the biblical purpose even of the local church, and sort of breaking that down. So I think on one hand, obviously it is the responsibility not only of the pastor, but sort of as an elder team, right? Which we would all call those people kind of the pastor shepherds of the, overseers of the church, just to make sure that your church has a program where anyone who, because it is a command that Jesus gives us to proclaim the gospel, certainly it seems like a good starting place would be for a church, all churches, to have some kind of a program. In fact, I often mentioned, I don't have a lot of pet peeves in ministry, but one of my big pet peeves is a pastor who will say from the pulpit, we all need to be, sharing the gospel and blah, blah, share with your neighbors and people you work with and blah, blah, blah. And yet that same church doesn't have a program to help them do that. And unfortunately, what happens when a pastor preaches that and there's not a program for them then to learn how to do it, for many people, I think what you call the people in the pews, they say they feel bad because they know they're supposed to be sharing the gospel, but they don't know how. Now, they also have a responsibility to speak up and say, Pastor, you preach this, and I don't know how. Could you teach me, right? But the fact that they would be preaching that and not have a program, it just kind of goes over people's head, and they go, well, I don't know how. And it's just easier not to share than to share, right? And so certainly, and it's an easy thing. It's really a pretty easy thing to do for a church. I mean, to be able to, even if it was quarterly or even twice a year, just to say, hey, if there's anyone at this church that, we really value evangelism in this church. We just want to make sure that all of you know how to share the gospel. This Thursday night, we're going to have a 1-hour session, and we're going to teach you, and then we'll, follow through with you and make sure that, as you have those early opportunities to share the gospel, because, especially if you're new at sharing the gospel, that can feel, you could even memorize a script of some kind or, kind of have the program, but it gets a little clunky at first. And so you get better at that. In other words, the more you do it, and we'll be there to kind of help you, support you in that way. And so I would say, it really should be 100% of those people saying that that's the elder's job, just because, that's one of the biblical purposes of the local church, is to glorify God by proclaiming the gospel, right, and then making disciples. So maybe that's a good place to start with that.
Yeah, so, Lifeway, and this one was written down as from Lifeway, that they had said 52% of believers had prayed for non-believers in the last 6 months.
Oh, okay.
Less than that had actually spoken to the person.
Oh, right.
So, and I don't know if it could have been a little higher, but I think it was around 38% actually went and spoke to the non-believer. I know I've made people angry sometimes when I talk about my views on prayer, because they tend to take my views and turn it into something I wasn't saying. Okay. Because I tend to, I like to point out, we often say prayer is the most important thing a Christian can do. And I'll say, wrong. Give me your Bible and I'll show you. The greatest commandment we were given was to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength.
All right.
Okay, prayer is a piece of that puzzle. It is not the whole of the puzzle.
That's exactly right. And
so to say that prayer is something that it's not, it doesn't help. And, we can, in one way, you never find anywhere in Scripture where it says pray for a non-believer. I preface that with saying there's nothing wrong with praying for a non-believer.
That's right. I would agree with that.
But it doesn't give the command to pray for someone's salvation. However, with that said, if we're only praying for them and we're not willing to communicate with them, then I think we've missed the scriptural point, because faith comes from hearing and hearing from the Word of God.
That's right.
It doesn't say faith comes from because someone prayed for me.
No, you're exactly right.
So, but there is, I'll agree that there is definitely power, and there's something to prayer that I don't think even the greatest prayer warriors can really comprehend. That is, that's true about prayer. But at the same time, if we're not willing to open our mouths and actually share the message, we're not really sharing the gospel. I mean, how much do we actually care if that person actually hears it if we're not willing to tell them? Or
That's right.
if, and we don't tell them, if only 38% are saying something, there's something. Obviously, there's at least for 52%, according to Lifeway, that there is a concern enough to pray for them.
Right.
So why is there such a gap between a concern to pray for them versus a concern to actually share with them? Like that we don't have information on.
Oh,
and
right.
We could only speculate.
Right. I mean, I would say just quickly, I think part of the answer to that is just simply, obviously it's much easier just to be praying for them rather than, because once you actually share the gospel, you don't know what their response is going to be. They could easily get angry. I mean, I've had people get angry, oh, I don't need that, baloney or whatever. And so they may want to, might be trying to preserve the relationship kind of a thing with this person. Because you do have to kind of put yourself out there a little bit, once you've shared the gospel. Now, I would also say with that hopefully, particularly if it's a neighbor or someone you work with or even a family member, you've kind of been able to develop that relationship where you've kind of heard their story, they've heard yours, and neither one of us can actually tell our story without talking about the gospel, right? And what Jesus has done in our own lives and how he's transformed us and all of that. So, but yeah, I think the initial thing is it's just easier to sit in a room and pray for someone rather than actually opening your mouth and telling them about Jesus.
Yeah, so recently I did an episode with a guy named Sawyer Root. He's a friend of mine, and his passion is sharing the gospel with Christians.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. So because, and he's framing it in such a way that, just because your father was a Christian, your grandfather was a Christian,
right.
Your grandfather was a pastor, your uncle was, on and on and on,
right,
doesn't make you a Christian.
That's
Just because
right.
you were born in the Bible Belt doesn't make you a Christian.
Yeah, which you see that a lot more in the Southeast.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. And just because you go to church.
Someone says they're a Christian, but you have to go, okay, tell me exactly what that means. And evangelism is a little different here.
Exactly. And you could be sitting in a church and not be a Christian.
Exactly.
I mean, there's nothing
That's right.
magical about sitting in a pew week after week. And I was going to actually wait till the end to mention this, but
okay.
I think this is a good time to actually talk about this because I'm going to bring someone on who's a youth pastor because I'm going to go deeper in this with him, specifically about Gen Z. Okay, my kids are Gen Z.
All right.
I am Gen X. I'm like on the borderline with millennials. So, and this isn't a statistic about Gen Z because I think when I was looking at it with Barna hadn't done the research. I don't know, maybe they're in the middle of the research, but they definitely haven't released any research related to Gen Z, but millennials.
Okay.
And I don't have the exact number, but it was almost 50%. So I think it was about 48% maybe, if I remember correctly. But nearly 50% of millennial Christians, not just millennials in general, but millennial Christians, believe it's wrong to share the gospel with someone of a different faith with hopes that they will become a Christian.
Wow.
Self-identified Christians, I mean, that could be a number of things, a number of types of Christians that are out there. But Christians nonetheless believe it's that many millennials. And in the Barna website, because that's where I got it from, it had mentioned they didn't have the research yet about Gen Z, but they were concerned that number was going to be higher with Gen Z. Now, I know millennials who are missionaries, who are very active.
Oh, they're full on, yeah.
Yeah, they're extremely active at sharing their faith, okay? It's not a knock on every single one within that category.
Right.
Because when you look at it, even Gen X, I think we were in the 30 percentile maybe.
Okay.
So from elders, which would have been my grandparents,
Okay.
to baby boomers,
Right.
my parents,
To our parents.
to Gen Z, us, then millennials and Gen X, millennials, Gen Z. Every generation, that percentage has gone up.
Which is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So elders and boomers were roughly, you could say, there really wasn't a difference between the two. There was a slight uptick.
Okay.
So it did increase, but it was minimal.
Okay.
So I don't know if you would count that as, there's a huge change taking place in our culture.
Oh, right.
But then Gen X shows up, and there was a much higher increase. And of course, millennials, an increase. So millennials was almost double boomers.
Which is really something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, my generation is in the middle. I mean, you talk about discipleship. You write books about disciple making.
Definitely.
You're writing a book right now. I won't get into it if you don't want to, but I won't mention the topic. But I know you're writing about a specific a religious group of people in the United States, of just how to engage with them and share with them.
That's right.
I mean, how obviously God isn't. We can be concerned about the state of the church in the U.S. I think that's okay, and I would agree that. On a recent episode, I was talking about Iran, and we were talking about Islam and mosques being built in the U.S., and the guy made a great point that, God's not up there worried about all the mosques being built here.
That's right.
Okay, he's God. So he's not worried about these statistics.
That's right.
But at the same time,
he knows,
I think statistics are good because they help us see the big picture
definitely
of what's happening. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, well, it is concerning, right, that this, from generation to generation, that this percentage continues to go up, because, again, I firmly believe that the Bible tells us to proclaim the gospel, and obviously, if you have any concern for, other people, not just people that but I would think that you would, as a believer, you would want them also to experience what you've experienced, in this new life that you have in Christ. And I mean, it is a loving thing to do, to tell someone about Jesus and to tell someone about the gospel, right? And I mean, it's sort of like, someone that we may know in our church who is going through he or she has some kind of a big sin issue that they're going through, to leave that person in that state, continuing to sin, and not to lovingly confront them and try to get them to, come back to a life that is honoring to God, is an unloving thing to do. And I think it's kind of that same thing. I mean, to leave someone in an unregenerate, situation apart from Christ. I mean, partially because we know what happens to people who do not, accept Christ. And so this is kind of an eternity issue, right? So, yeah. So obviously, with that percentage continuing to go up, I might just initially, just off the top of my head, I might correlate that some with our churches today, and how there are just fewer and fewer churches where, the leadership has a heart to really, have a biblical purpose of their local church, which again includes, equipping, in Ephesians 4, we see this, that the leadership is called to equip their saints for the work of ministry, which then includes the proclamation of the gospel and making disciples. And, too many, and you and I have talked about this a lot, Steve, but there are just too many churches, particularly in America, that are about making things as easy as possible for those who are coming, right? Kind of this idea of an attractional model. I mean, it's very easy to come to a church where you're more entertained than you are, challenged to live a life, on fire for Christ. And so it could be that as these churches are getting more, I don't want to say soft, but they are kind of getting soft in these areas, then that percentage continues to go up. So,
please say it. It's soft.
Yeah, it would be interesting to kind of see if there's a study that has done that correlation. But I think it's like, well, if one's happening, then probably the other is too, right? So
because I think on one side with that question, I guess you do have to ask the question. These people they're asking, these 48%, 50% of millennials, do they actually believe in hell? I mean, we don't. That has become almost like.
No, that's an important part of it, right?
Yeah, and I'd hate to sound so sensationalist about it, but it's almost become like an F word in Christendom. Like, we can't
talk about hell.
Yeah. I mean, but Jesus talked about it.
He did.
We're so afraid. There's so much cherry picking going on. Now, we can argue, till we're blue in the face about what hell actually means, because there are varying views on that.
Right. And what happens there.
But I would say generally, even in the varying views, I would say across the board, it's generally a very, very unpleasant place.
Definitely.
Okay, whether it's technically a real hellfire place, or, there's some people say just because you're separated from God, that's hell in of itself.
Right. Just eternal separation from Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
But either way, it's hell. I mean, hell.
Right.
There's reason why when people say, derogatory words that involve the word hell, they're saying it because in their mind, they said that's a horrible place to be. No one wants to be there.
Right.
And so why would we want anyone to go there?
Yeah, it's very unloving to leave them in that position, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
And of course, then we start arguing, well, I don't, judge not or lest you be judged, but we tend to forget that there's more to that passage than that. There's more to take the log out of your own eye before you take the speck out of someone else's eye. Even though I heard someone say recently, yes, Jesus did say that, but he didn't say don't take the speck out of someone else's eye. It's just you need to deal with it in your life first, and then you actually know how to deal with it in their life better, and you can help them. And I just find that we just want to have a hands-off Christendom by and large.
Right.
And I guess in some ways it makes sense why these numbers are the way they are if we're teaching people to be hands-off. You had mentioned don't want to offend.
Uh-huh.
I don't want to offend someone because it's too unloving and they may never believe. But it's like praying. If you don't actually say something to them, if someone's walking along the side of a cliff and that one trip and that's it, they're done for. And you don't want to offend them because, heaven forbid, I warn them, you're about to fall over there.
Right.
I mean,
again, it's that same thing. Yeah.
But we would all argue, I would never do that.
Right.
If someone was that idiotic to walk across the very side of a cliff like that,
right.
I'm going to warn them.
Right.
I think anybody in their right mind would warn that person. But then for whatever reason, we view the gospel so differently.
That's right.
Like, it's not worth warning people.
Yeah, and I think, Steve, part of that, too, is, of course, just this, we're losing kind of the sense of eternity, what that really means. I mean, we might have 80 years here on earth, and so it's just easy for us we just day in and day out, our days seem like they just continue, for a long time, and we just kind of lose track of this 80 years, if we get 80 years, is just a tiny speck on this timeline, this eternal timeline. The fact that for the rest of eternity, in other words, those days just never stop. You're either with Christ or without him. And again, those people that you love, I certainly would not want any of those people that I know to be without him first. I mean, just so much longer, right? Eternity is so much longer. And
hell is hell. It's a terrible place.
That's right. Forever.
Yeah.
is where those people are.
Yeah, you had brought up pastors, leadership, that it's their job to equip, and we talked about that earlier. And we talked about that, 68% in this one study shows that they believe it's the pastor's job to equip them. Now, I agree with that. On the flip side, I'll argue, well, you hear these things, you should also do some research yourself.
Well, they do have a personal responsibility.
Sure.
Right. And you can, like I mentioned, even at our own ministry, we have if you don't know how to share the gospel, we have a video training course. So you can take care of that yourself too. And it's not a excuse for you to not be sharing the gospel because you haven't learned it from your pastor. You still have a personal responsibility.
One statistic you gave me, and I'm not sure where you got it, maybe from Barna. It's
okay.
Most likely it's probably that or Lifeway, because that's tend to be where we look the most. 12% of pastors, in light of that, say they are effectively equipping church members.
Wow. Only 12%?
12%. These are responses from pastors, I believe. And then only 5 to 9% of evangelicals are actually sharing the gospel. Now, with that said, I was listening to Kirk Cameron has a podcast.
Oh, okay.
And he has actually a relatively new podcast, like a newer one, and it's with his son. I've never seen his son until now.
Fun.
And
that's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And his son was talking about, they were talking about sharing their faith. His son's a Gen Z. And he was talking about kind of the Gen Z perspective from his, how he sees things. And of course, Kirk Cameron is probably, I think, just a tad bit older than me.
That's right, in his 50s.
Yeah, he's in his 50s, I believe. And so he would be Gen X with me.
Right.
With you.
And me. Mm-hmm.
So, and he was talking about when he used to work with, who's that guy? I don't know if you remember, Ray Comfort.
Yeah.
And they used to go out on the street. I used to remember seeing those videos. I can't remember where I saw them.
Okay.
It may have been like on TBN or Daystar, or one of those channels. But it was always fascinating watching Ray Comfort, because he's a little bit more of a go-getter than I am.
He is.
I mean,
that's his ministry, I think.
Yeah, he's really gifted in that area.
Yeah, definitely.
But they were talking about that they were often bringing up that, when they would, watch believers and just make observations themselves, I believe is the way he was putting it, that when they were talking about how many people actually share their faith, like true born-again believers, they were like, oh, it's in the single digits.
Oh, right. It is, yeah.
It hasn't even hit 10%. So this 5 to 9%
kind of fits that, right?
Yeah, it even fits what he was saying.
Okay.
12% of pastors are saying they're doing a decent job. 68% of Christians say it's the pastor's job. 5 to 9% of evangelicals are, according to this one research, sharing their faith. And of course, Kirk Cameron is saying, based on their observation, it's single digits.
Okay.
I mean, how much of a problem is that?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's huge. It's really huge, quite huge. Yeah, I think a lot of that. So another one of the books that I wrote is just called Searching for a Biblical Church. And so the hope in that is it's really a book more for the people in the pews as a way to be able to tell if you're attending a church that kind of has a biblical purpose. And if you're not, there's a section in each chapter. Here's the inconsistencies in each of these areas, and here's what you can do about it. And so I would say that it's a both and in terms of, yes, pastors and elder teams should be looking at what the biblical purpose of the local church is, and then working hard at doing it, right? And those in the congregation, as Bible-believing Christians, right? I mean, a big part of this is, what do we really think about the Bible itself? Is it the authoritative, inspired, and infallible Word of God or not? And so if it is, we use it to find what the biblical purpose of the local church is, what our responsibility is as congregation members. And another stat that I often quote is there's a organization at discipleship.org, and they say that only 5% of American churches have a reproducible disciple-making strategy, which
5%.
Yeah, 5%, which is just so sad given that, Jesus' command to go make disciples is one of those, 50 commands of Christ. And I guess part of what I would say is, okay, if so many of these stats are in the single digits, and they're in single digits in areas that really should be what a church does. I mean, that should be the primary purpose, but only 5 to 10% of the churches are doing those things. What are you doing otherwise? Again, that just becomes much more of a cultural Christianity church where we kind of just, it's more of a fellowship thing. Are we doing, a way to make friends and, we get together and sing some good songs and, we're preaching just kind of simple messages. And yeah, on one hand, I don't really want to be a part of a church like that. But then it does actually become a thing where, and I know you and I have talked about this, it becomes hard. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you really want to be at these things and actually doing them and be at a church that also has that heart, it's hard to find a church that you can attend and become a member of. Because I'm certainly not interested in becoming a member of a church that just kind of not at the things that Jesus has commanded us to do.
So on here, you were talking, you brought up the great Matthew 28.
Yeah.
Just kind of, it was like the culmination of everything Jesus has taught his disciples, right up there
right
on the mountain, right before he leaves. He's flying up into heaven, saying goodbye, see you later kind of thing, until I come back.
Right.
And so it really was the culmination of everything. It was almost like the period at the end of a sentence.
Yeah.
So, one stat was saying that 28% of believers are fully engaged in discipleship or are living as a disciple, I guess. And the way that was defined was they're being discipled while also discipling others.
Okay.
So 28%. That's only a quarter.
Oh, right.
That's not very much.
Oh, right. And even that seems a little high, but
yeah,
in my mind.
And there was another statistic. It was lower. I mean, much lower. So it's kind of hard to know which one is actually, maybe there's a middle of the road there, but either way, it's low.
Right.
I mean, when Jesus was talking, go and make disciples, I think one of my pet peeves now, and I say it with full understanding of I used to be there.
Okay.
I used to be that because it's the way I was taught. A lot of things you were taught, it just gets stuck in your brain. That's how you're supposed to do. It's all about getting someone to say the prayer. I mean, I come from a Southern Baptist background as a believer, and we're notorious for get to that prayer, get to that salvation, get to that sinner's prayer.
Right.
That's where we put the, take our chalk, put a mark on the board, keep adding to it. We love crusades. We love that number of how many people believed the gospel through the sinner's prayer.
Right.
I mean, that is the tip of the spear for us.
Okay.
But getting beyond that.
Right. Which we should, right?
Yeah. Because, especially one thing I saw in China when we lived there was honestly that prayer. I would, and there's, as there's a lot of arguments even on YouTube with Christian YouTubers and things of whether that's a legitimate prayer to pray or, whether it's real. Are you actually a believer? If you actually, there's there are arguments about it, some disagreements.
Definitely.
But irregardless, on one end, there are people who pray that prayer where it's meant nothing to them.
That's right.
I mean, because I remember one time we had a team come and work with us from a church in Texas. They met this girl. She prayed the sinner's prayer. She was a Buddhist. And I trusted them. I mean, I had no reason to just discount what they were saying to me.
Right.
And so when they left, they gave me the information, and I had a couple of team members there, and I sent one of them to go follow up with this girl. He came back to me and says, she's not a Christian.
Oh, right.
Now, I got a little bit of an argument with him because he was prone to some legalism
Okay.
And so, I took it as you're like adding too much to what someone needs to do to actually believe the gospel. And we went back and forth. And so I said, look, my wife and I will go talk to her. Called her up, met at a coffee shop. Within 30 seconds of I kid you not, 30 seconds of our conversation, we knew for a fact she was not a believer.
Okay.
And so I brought up the team. Now, she didn't know they were a short-term mission team. I just brought up the friends. And she said, yeah, I remember them. They're so nice. They're so fun to be around. I said, they were talking about what they believe, like religiously. Oh, yeah, we talked about that. And I said, and they had mentioned that you had prayed with them? Oh, yeah, I did. I did. They were saying some words, and then and I kind of repeated the words, kind of repeat after me scenario.
Oh, right.
And I said, well, what did that mean to you? Like, what did you think, what you were praying, what you were saying? She goes, I have no idea what I was saying.
Oh, right.
And then right after she goes, because I'm a Buddhist. I was like, okay. So I reached out to that group, that church, and I just wanted to reach out to them, not to scold them or anything like that.
No.
Just to say.
I mean, they were probably doing that in very good faith. And
yeah, I didn't think they were.
Without any malicious intent or anything.
Absolutely,
like
100%. I just wanted them to know, keep talking with her. Of course, back then we didn't have WhatsApp or Signal or any of those things. But,
right.
We had whatever it was, Skype and.
Yeah.
I can't remember all the things.
AOL early on had a messaging
service. Yeah, MSN Messenger.
Yeah, right.
Email. But I said, don't worry about security. If she wants to talk. Just keep the relationship going. Keep sharing with her. Maybe one day this will turn around. The next thing I did is I get an email in return telling me that one person on the team read the email. This was from the pastor, and the pastor said, he quoted the lady who was on the team. And I quote, she said, if I could, I would jump through the screen and strangle Steve for saying that.
Saying what? That she wasn't a believer?
Yes.
Really?
And then the pastor went on to scold me and tell me, who am I to play God?
All right.
And I wrote back, said,
well, you weren't, though.
I'm not. I'm repeating what she said to me.
We sat down with her and talked to her.
Learn from her, who understand the culture.
Right.
And actually was able to ask very specific questions. And she specifically said she had no clue what she was praying. And she ended that with, I'm a Buddhist. And then we learned that her dad was the PSB. So if anyone who doesn't know what PSB, Public Security Bureau, basically the police of China.
Right.
The street cops.
Yeah, like a national police force.
Yeah. So her dad was the city's head of the PSB for people who were doing illegal religious activity.
Oh, wow.
Trying to stop it.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, I hope we don't make her mad. But anyways,
right.
We're already too deep in the conversation.
Oh, right.
But she was really cool. She was really nice.
Oh, right.
But, on one end, I was really shocked by the reply because it just showed me.
Well, totally.
There
totally
are
inappropriate.
Enough Christians out there, and this is concerning to me, that we think, well, just because someone says the sinner's prayer, that somehow there's some magic dust in that, that you're just going to sprinkle on people.
Right.
That, the magic fairy dust, and it's just going to, voila, I'm a Christian. Just because I repeated this. That's the biggest bunch of...
Yeah, baloney,
Yeah, we'll just leave it with that. That almost, it's like a lie from the pit of hell.
Definitely.
Because if there's nothing in the heart behind it, because it does say, now I do agree in Romans, if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord, we do have to confess it. So that's where... That
is one of those things. But then you also have to...
Believe in your heart.
Right, receive him and believe in his name. Right.
Yeah, so there's a confession.
Which at that point she didn't.
Yeah, she confessed it, supposedly, but really it's repeating it.
Oh, right.
But there was nothing in the heart that was believing it.
Right.
And too often, and I know we kind of hit a rabbit trail here, but too often we get into, they said the prayer, we're good to go.
That's right.
Let's move on. reach them and leave them. I remember someone making that statement to me one time.
Oh, right.
Do you want to be someone who reaches and leaves them, or do you want to be someone who actually makes disciples?
That's right.
Okay, if you only reach them and leave them, you're not making disciples.
Yeah.
You're barely scratching the surface.
Yeah. And Steve, maybe this is a good time just quickly to mention, because I had a very similar experience when we were in China and all those years involved in China, and amongst cultures that are, they want to make sure that you're saving face, right? They'll say and kind of do kind of whatever for your sake, than
100%.
Than for their own, and that's a culture where spending. Now, of course, this team came and went, but if they had the ability to stay in town and spend extensive time with her, just continuing to sort of be the salt and light around her. My experience is that Chinese who eventually accepted Christ, just kind of, there was no one day where they just received Christ and they could say, June 24th of whatever year, is when I accepted Christ. They just weren't believers, and then they were, and they couldn't exactly tell you exactly what day that was. And that's actually what you're looking for, right? Are people who've now received Christ as their Lord and Savior. And it didn't need to be a particular day. So anyway, just a quick note that in those cultures where saving face is a big deal, many times when you ask, maybe that's where this asking them to pray a prayer is a little bit of a detriment, just because more times than not, it's probably not going to, quote unquote, stick the first time. It's really more about that long-term kind of building that relationship with them.
And I told a lot of people that, especially over in China, and I would argue the same thing here. It's not so much trying to get them to the prayer. I mean, of course, we want to get to that point where we see them come to faith. There's no question about that.
That's right.
And like you said earlier, the motivation behind what they're doing, I don't really fault them for that. But we have to accept reality afterwards,
right.
when we do a little bit more digging. If we discover that they're claiming, oh, no, I just repeated, I have no idea what I said, then you accept that.
Right. Well,
okay?
most definitely.
It's not a knock on the person who shared. It's not a knock on the person who led them in prayer. It's just a reality.
That's right.
And we can, we have more information. We know better about that person. So what do we do now? It's like, here's the problem. How do we solve the problem?
That's right.
So
yeah, and we don't want to totally get into it, but it would make another good conversation to talk about this pastor and these people that were so...
Well, I've known a lot of people like that.
That's a whole nother thing to just examine at another time.
I mean, I've seen it. And
that's really bad, actually. That's really horrible.
And not all Southern Baptists are that way. And I definitely want to give that disclaimer.
I mean...
And I know a lot who aren't. But I've seen enough of...
I mean, you sat with that lady.
Reach them and leave them.
Yeah. At a coffee shop and heard directly. I mean, it's almost like they didn't believe that what you heard her say, she didn't say, or... I mean, that's a whole nother...
And I didn't want to hear what she said. I mean, when she said it, that's not what I was hoping would come out of her mouth.
You were hoping that she had received Christ.
I was hoping to prove the guy wrong.
That other guy.
Because we did have some, intense conversations prior about other things. Mm-hmm. And, and I just wanted to help him to understand, look, the gospel is not complicated. Okay.
Right.
But at the same time, there is a heart issue that is attached to it that, if the heart's not in it, we can pray that prayer 1,000,000 times, and it's not magical.
Right.
And so...
No, it's not, for sure.
And
it can be a tool, but it's not...
Oh, 100% it's a tool. Because even in China, and I learned to do this in China, is I just got to the point, and I would do it here too with Americans. I ask a lot of questions. I don't assume.
Right.
Just because I share the gospel, excuse me about that, just because I share the gospel, I don't necessarily just want to say, oh, do you want to pray the prayer now? Because that tends to happen a lot, I think.
Right.
Like, okay, I shared the gospel because I've seen that happen, and I actually got into someone's face and said, back off.
Oh.
Because I was with a friend from Taiwan, and this other guy was being super aggressive about sharing the gospel and really trying to force him to pray the prayer. And I was like, back off. I know he's not ready. This is my friendship, not yours. But he was determined That he just showed up at the scene.
Oh, right.
He was going to tell this.
all-
Yeah. I mean, he really was.
That's
and I
not
had to
good.
get in his face to get him to back off.
Oh, right.
I've never had to do that before.
In fact, I would say that could just be a real detriment, actually, to the gospel.
It can. Now, thankfully, I was with the guy. So
Right.
when the other guy left, I could
Because you think
kind of
about it
calm
from the
situation
perspective
down.
of this guy your Taiwanese friend, that could come off as very aggressive and, that's not a good, I mean.
Yeah, and so I
Yeah.
learned to ask questions. Like, I shared the gospel, and I'd be like, so what'd you think about that? Like, I'm just trying, I don't want to feed a question. I don't want to ask a question that's going to feed an answer automatically. Like, I want to ask a question that you need to tell me what you truly think.
Right.
And I may preface that with, whether you agree or disagree, like, or I don't care. I'm just curious what you thought about what I just shared. Because that's going to tell me a lot. And I did that with one guy in China. And there was a pastor with me. And I'd been talking with this guy for weeks.
Okay.
And we were in my apartment, and this pastor was with me. And, of course, we shared with him. And he was very open about talking and all that stuff. And I just asked him a question. So what do you think about that? After we shared the gospel with him, and he didn't say anything. We just looked at him, and he was like, for people who are looking on video, my eyes are closed, and
right.
like I'm looking at him going, what's he doing? I look at the pastor. It's like, what's he doing? The pastor's like, I have no idea. And then he kind of opens his eyes, and then I proceed to say, so is this something you want to believe? He goes, oh, I was already telling God that.
Oh, he was praying. That's what he was doing.
And we were like looking at each other, well, that was easy. Like, I didn't have to lead him in a,
That's
like,
right.
he had already heard enough. He already knew enough. But it was like, in that moment when he's ready, he's ready.
Right.
Like, that person,
That's great.
male, female, doesn't matter.
That's
when they're
right.
ready, they're ready.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean someone can't help them, because
Yeah.
sometimes there's that little bit of anxiety and fear, like, how do I do this? Because I was like that. So actually, because I grew up in an independent Baptist church. And,
Oh, wow.
And I wouldn't classify when I, quote, first prayed the prayer as when I was a believer. Okay, I would classify much later into college is actually when I became a believer. And so I was rebaptized in college.
Oh, okay.
And so, but, I had really didn't want to be in church, and there was reasons why, and I, tried everything to get away from church. And of course, going into college, it was a lot easier to, not go to church, and my roommates were not Christians. And
Oh, right.
but this guy I went to high school with, we were roommates in college for a period of time, and he decided one day to go to a Catholic church because he grew up Catholic, and I got jealous of him. So I was like, well, I'm going to go to a Baptist church.
Oh, okay.
it was strange, but it got me to the Baptist church. And they were really good at sharing the gospel there. And there was a point where I had prayed. I can't remember what had happened. Oh, no. It was, I had heard they had to invite this guy in to preach, and he had preached the gospel while he was talking, and I was mulling it over. But then when I got home, it clicked that if I were to die today, I knew where I was going. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't going to be with Christ.
Okay.
But because of the independent Baptist mentality that I grew up with,
Oh, right.
well, at least as a kid, it's what I assumed was being said, because it's what I observed. Whether that's what they were trying to convey or not, it's what I saw.
Right.
That the only way to become a Christian is you have to walk the aisle
Oh, right.
and talk to someone and then pray with them.
Right.
And so I'm panicked, kind of on a state of anxiety all week. Lord, don't let me die this week.
Oh.
I got to get to church on Sunday morning.
Right. It got that serious.
So I was just praying all week, Lord, don't let me die. So I could get to church Sunday morning, walk down, and I'm just waiting for the sermon to end. Like, can you get to the end of the sermon? So I can walk the aisle and go talk to someone.
Oh.
Like, let's get this over with.
Oh, right.
And but obviously nothing happened, and it's kind of humorous in some ways, because I guess you could argue I already believed the gospel at that point.
Right.
And in some way I was already confessing it to a degree.
Right.
But I thought there was like a specific way I had like certain words I had to use, because that's, in essence, that's what I
what you
grew up to understand.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
but so I know we got a long thing about, and we're getting near the end of this, but I want to just mention, you had mentioned Matthew 28.
Yes.
In it, because then we got off reach them and leave them kind of conversation for a bit.
No, it's all good.
But I think it's important to have that discussion as well.
Definitely.
But the key is, I think, to some degree, when you have only 28% of them actually engaged, some of the train of thought that I have is that, I think one of the issues we may have as believers, by and large, and this is generalizing, is that there's too many of us who think it's the pastor's job not just to equip us, but to actually disciple my friends.
Right. That's right.
So my job is, well, maybe I should share the gospel with them, but my goal is maybe a lot of people, let's invite them so the pastor can share the gospel with them. There's nothing wrong with that.
I would say there's actually nothing wrong with that, right?
But that's a proxy evangelism.
That's right.
Okay, it's removing my responsibility.
That's right.
Of what I'm to do. It's great if your pastor does it.
And my obedience and actually
but are you doing it?
Obeying one of these commands to go proclaim the gospel yourself.
But then when they believe, then what? Are you part of the process of teaching them everything God has taught you?
Right.
I heard recently, and I wish I could remember. I'm not going to say where I heard it. Okay. But it was on a podcast.
Okay.
And the guy was basically saying, we're not all these, and I can't remember the exact words, but it's like, basically he was referencing professional pastors, like, theological experts. Okay. We're not all theological experts. And the way he said it, it was like, well, I'm giving myself a pass for certain things because I'm not a theological expert.
Right.
I didn't go to seminary.
I think that's quite common.
I didn't become a pastor.
Definitely. My
argument is that's nowhere in Scripture.
It definitely is not.
Okay, if we have to be a theological expert to actually disciple someone, well, then the early disciples and apostles were failures at that point because they weren't technically theological experts.
No.
Okay.
Definitely not.
Okay, they didn't go to seminary. Now, they did learn from the master. I mean, they had much better teachers than any seminary
definitely
in the world today.
I mean, just by observing Jesus, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
But the only thing Jesus said was, and teaching them everything I've taught you to obey. So there was a process of teaching them. He didn't just dump everything on them the moment he met them.
That's right.
He spent couple of years with them of teaching them step by step.
Right. Who
he was, what he was calling them to do, how to do it, modeling it, sending them out to do it, coming back, debriefing them, rinse and repeat over and over.
Right.
So it was just a matter of what do you teach? What do you know? Say that.
Right. Start there.
If you believe the gospel, you know enough of the gospel to convey the gospel.
That's right.
If you think you can't convey the gospel, then you need to ask yourself, do you actually understand the gospel? Which would go into, do you actually believe the gospel? I mean, you can wordplay this a lot.
Right.
But if you truly believe, and I believe most people who claim it probably do, I'm not denying it. I think it's just more of a mental block. But if you believe it, you know it. You know that much.
That's right.
So you can convey that much. And then as you learn more, the disciples behind you who are following you, you just have to teach that. You don't have to go into deep theological things like John MacArthur could do, or John Piper, or your own pastor. You don't have to be that at that level.
Not at all.
You just have to teach them. They don't know what you know. So as you're growing, just pass it along. And then as they're growing, they pass it. I mean, it's a trickle-down effect, which takes the responsibility off the pastor, which frees up the pastor to be more focused on just training and equipping.
That's right.
Which is what they should be doing anyways.
That's right.
And then the people in the pews are evangelizing and discipling people that they're around. I mean, I know you would agree with that.
100%.
100% of our conversations are
that's right.
often centered around that.
Yeah, that's right.
what would you say to a Christian who is either, on one part actively engaged? Like, how would you encourage them? How would you encourage a believer who is saying, "Oh, I've never heard this before"? Like, I'm just told I'm supposed to go to church, serve in the church, tithe to the church, and support the church. Like, I've never actually been told I'm to actually go out. I mean, granted, there's conversations to have so how do you go out and do it? We're not all Ray Comfort.
That's
we
right.
don't all have Ray Comfort skills or abilities. I don't.
I don't either.
You won't find me stopping random people on the street one after another and talking to them. Hey, you going to hell?
Right. Right.
That's just not it's not how I do it.
Right.
And so there are ways, there are definitely some equipping things that have to happen, teaching people just different methods to help them find their way. But what would you say to someone like that this is new to them, maybe they've been around it for a while?
Right. Yeah, a lot to be said. To summarize, I would say initially, in my ministry, one of the things that we talk a lot about are these commands that Jesus gives to his followers. And then we kind of tie these commands. And in fact, on our equippingdepot.org website, if you go to under the printed resources, we actually have a little worksheet on these 50 commands of Jesus. And
you have a book here.
That's
that
right.
You brought.
Yeah, that's right. So I'll talk about that in just a sec. So the commands then are followed up by these, statements that Jesus says in John 14, where he says, "Whoever has my commands and obeys them, he it is that loves me." So, now that's not the only way that we show Jesus that we love him. But if you do love him, you do want to show him that. And he himself is saying, one of the ways you do that is by obeying these commands, right? And one of them, which you mentioned in Matthew 28, is where Jesus says, "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations." So if you're not making disciples, that is something that, Jesus clearly says, that's how you show me you love me. So if you love me, you learn how to do it. So that's why, I did write a book here on it's just called "Now You Can Make Disciples."
And these aren't long books.
No, you can see. This is whatever this is, 170 pages or whatever. And it's very...
Oh, that's your longest book, I think.
It might be my longest book. Yeah. So, and the heart behind it is for that person who says, well, I see now that Jesus wants me to do it, but I would not have any idea on how to do it, right? And so what I do is I kind of just take you through what making disciples is, what it is, kind of the biblical basis. Of course, for those of us that have a heart for disciple making, kind of our number one passage is this passage in 2 Timothy 3, where Paul is, writing to Timothy, and he says, "The things I've taught you entrust to reliable men who will be able to teach others also." So you can see kind of these three spiritual generations. I've taught you these things. Now you go teach them to someone else in a way that they then can. And so that's where we get to this, reproduction. So for example, I'm teaching you, and then you're then going and, you've got people. And pretty quickly, if you keep that reproduction going, you've got kind of a nice little team of people who all have a heart for disciple making. So one of the highlights of the book actually is I'm even giving you kind of the first. So you have someone that you've, again, through the book, I'm teaching you on, okay, you want to begin making disciples. Here's how you go find those people. Here's kind of the quote unquote pitch you would give them to begin meeting with you weekly. And then once you get those people, a lot of people go, well, I wouldn't know what to say to them, right? So at the end of the book, there's 24 weekly topics that, so it's just, here's how you have a quiet time. Here's how you begin memorizing scripture. Here's a lesson on taming the tongue. Here's a lesson on, tithing and, just the things that a disciple of Jesus would be doing. And so you don't even need to determine what those weekly topics would be. I'm literally just giving those to you. And so really what I'm wanting to do is make it as, usable as I can in relation to, you don't know how to make disciples, don't worry. If you go through this book, Because, that was my question when I wrote the book is, generally speaking, to become a disciple maker, you have to be discipled yourself. So the question is, could I write a book to help someone become a disciple maker, but they've not been discipled themselves? And kind of the consensus amongst my disciple making friends was, well, it would have to be someone that's quite eager to do it. But yeah, you can do that. And then once they've done it a time or two, they get better and better at it. And, so that's what I would say to someone who is in the pews who is saying, yeah, I see that Jesus wants, well, I guess the first thing I would say is that is one way that you show Jesus you love him, clearly. I mean, he says that himself. So if you now realize that, then I'm just literally walking you through how to begin becoming a disciple maker. And I would just say, boy, do it more, because it is such a fulfilling ministry to see someone who does not know the spiritual disciplines, for example, and doesn't know how to, begin really walking with Jesus. And you see them grow, and then they get to a point where they're ready to find their own people to make disciples. It's just a really cool, God-honoring thing to be a part of. I just, recommend everybody who has accepted Christ to do it.
My experience with discipleship, it can be hard.
It can be hard.
Okay, it's not a walk in the park necessarily, because it's messy.
That's right.
Because you got to make yourself vulnerable.
Right.
You want the other people to be vulnerable.
That's right.
Okay, it's not.
And
it's
people
not like
you're discipling might have obstacles, and
100%.
Which I kind of walk people through how to kind of attack those obstacles, and so yeah, it's hard.
Because you don't want this just to be a Bible study where we show up, read the Bible, study it, and go home.
Because there's a lot of life on life.
It is life on life.
That's
and
right.
I had someone do it with me for 3 years.
Oh, isn't that great?
Soon after I became a believer. And
which I'm sure you look back on that time as just a real valuable time.
Oh,
right?
100%.
Right.
I mean, it shaped my view of discipleship.
That's perfect. And then to think how you could then invest in other people's lives in the way that person invested in you is pretty cool to think about, right?
And I'll just end with this, because as I was saying earlier, I am truly convinced on many levels, Christians who are either struggling with the idea of discipling someone or having the question of, I don't know how to do it, there is a mental block there. Mm-hmm. Okay, I was watching something, and I'm actually going to show my colleagues this in our meeting in a few weeks. So on YouTube, you can actually Google it or search for it on YouTube. Mm-hmm. Someone had taken a marker and drew a circle and put an ant in the middle of it.
Oh, okay.
The ant would not cross the line.
Oh.
And every time they drew the circle, even closed
Tighter.
it in, the ant kept getting they would stay within the white
circle.
space
that
they were on. They did that with a spider. A spider did the same thing. Now, at one point, the spider actually accidentally touched beyond the marker, the marked line, and realized it wasn't trapped. It was just in its head that I'm trapped. And so when it realized it wasn't trapped, that there was no barrier, they just went.
Okay.
And I truly believe with believers,
isn't that interesting?
That while there is a need for training, and there's no argument with that, I still believe that every believer knows something they can pass to another believer.
Definitely.
And especially if they're out there sharing the gospel and,
That's right.
and they see people become believers, they have enough inside of them to pour into them.
That's right.
They just have to step over that marker line.
That's right.
And get past the kind of the barrier we create that says, oh, I can't do it.
That's right.
We actually can.
That's right.
And I got that in areas of my life. There's areas where I struggle with that, and I have to push myself when I realize that that's what's happening.
Right.
So, this isn't all doom and gloom. The statistics may be real, but there are ways to resolve that.
That's right.
And if we're committed, and it takes commitment.
That's right.
And like anything, if we're going to do something different or do something new in our life or add something to our life, we have to ask what is most important. Is our priority making as much money as we can, or is our priority the kingdom of God?
Amen.
Okay, it doesn't mean God's not going to give you the ability to make money or not make money, but
That's right.
What's priority?
That's right.
And if our priority is the kingdom, there has to be some element of pouring into others.
That's right.
As hopefully we're being poured into.
Most definitely.
Hey, thank you for listening or watching today. As you heard in this episode, we talked a lot about disciple making, how to do it, maybe some aspects of it, but we also talked about some resources. So in the description, I'm going to point you to Mike's website that he mentioned, equippingdepot.org. And so if you want to get one of his resources that can help you just learn how to take those steps of making disciples, please go to it. And before I leave you today, go check out our website, livingenviado.com. We have a merch store on there so you can get some of our stuff. Every time someone buys something off our merch store or they leave a tip in the tip jar on our website to help us with this podcast, it goes to helping us do our work in advancing God's kingdom around the world and the various ministries we're connected to. So again, that is livingenviado.com. You'll see our podcast, you'll see our merch store, you'll see several things on there. So until next time, don't forget, as believers, to go live courageous, live boldly, and live Enviado.